Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our discussions of 1970s disaster movies. And I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on another very great, spectacular entertainment of the genre. And this was directed by Jerry Jameson and produced by William Fry and Jennings Lang. And it has one of the most remarkable casts, because it has, for example, in its cast, people like Jack Lemmon, Brenda Vaccaro, Lee Grant, Christopher Lee, Darren McGavin, Maidie Norman, Olivia de Havilland, Joseph Cotten, Kathleen Quinlan, Robert Foxworth, James Stewart, and George Kennedy. It is a film that I understand was initially released in 1977, and that year is significant because you can find reference to it in the title, because the film that I'm referring to is Airport 77. Now, before I go any further, I should point out, for those who might be interested, I've been relying on this particular Blu-ray collection, which is called Airport: The Complete Collection. It has all 4 of the films on Blu-ray disc, and you can see on the back it's a little bit small, but you can still see it. It's still visible. You can see the poster art for each of the films in this series of films called the Airport films. And so today we're focusing in on what is now the 3rd in such series of films, which is called Airport 77. One of the great strengths, I think, of the Airport series is that we have a selection of stories that may or may not be directly related. They might be perhaps only tangentially related in terms of content, in terms of the use of the airplane or the airport setting, and some kind of disaster. What is, I think, very well delineated and well presented in each of these films is that as we progress through these particular film series, this particular series of films, the Airports films, we have what could be described as being a separate, distinct disaster or series of disaster situations or circumstances, such that maybe you can say that one film is different from the other, is different from the other, is different from the other. In other words, we are getting a sense of variety when we consider the Airport films as a whole. There are, of course, lines of continuity, among which is the now iconic character who is Joe Patroni, played by George Kennedy. And he now figures into the context of this film, Airport 77. And also we get yet a further, say, evolution and development into his own character and into his own life. We've seen little glimpses of his life in the first film, and then Airport 1975, and now we get yet another change or different set of circumstances regarding him and his background and his job and the like. So yet another example of why these films are so fascinating, this character of Patroni and his development and evolution over time and over the films. It's one of the great and very entertaining aspects of these films, again centered around the now iconic performances by George Kennedy. But the films, going back to a discussion of the series, the films each have their own distinct feel and atmosphere, and that's due to the casts, and also that's due to the settings, but it's also due to the circumstances of the disaster elements that are embedded within each of the stories. With Airport 77, we have one of the most spectacularly conceived disaster plots or stories, I would suggest, because we have a story that involves a passenger airliner. It involves James Stewart and his character and what it is he is trying to achieve in terms of various artwork transport. There is also some drama and intrigue involving various members of the crew, included in which are people like Brenda Vaccaro's character and Jack Lemmon's character. And then when we get to the passengers, we have yet another source or sources of dramatic tension and melodrama. We have various couples or various people meeting for the first time, friends, maybe people who are romantically involved or intimate, married couples, or people who are thinking about marriage but maybe are not quite sure yet, people who are meeting each other for the first time and maybe love is in the air or potential love is in the air, love at first sight and that sort of thing, and friendships and companions and people meeting each other after not having seen each other for a long time, etc., etc. So this is the foundation, or these are the foundations for a variety of different, say, permutations of the drama or melodrama. And that's one of the things that makes films like Airport 77 so great. So we already have this establishment of these various networking of character development and arcs that, of course, culminate in the many levels of disaster that accompany this particular story. And I say many levels because there was so much going on in this film. So, for example, we have the airplane, we have the passenger airline, we have the transport of valuable works of art, we have a hijacking or skyjacking that involves a kind of conspiracy, we have the sleeping gas, the Bermuda Triangle, offshore oil drilling, crash into an open body of water, and an airplane that is now sinking into the ocean. And so we have flight, we have water, we have the rush of flooding within the cabin, and we have rescue operations from inside and also externally. So we have the tensions within the survivors in the body of the cabin trying to get out, trying to figure out what their situation is, trying to understand what's going on, and also trying to save their lives and the lives of others. So that's one source of the dramatic tension that revolves around the disasters. Then we have a great development externally involving rescue operations, Navy-based rescue operations and the like, included in which in that mix are the characters such as James Stewart and George Kennedy, with the characters that they play, and others. So there is a whole complex net of operations that is on display in this film with full force and a grand sense of spectacle and entertainment to the max. This is one of the most entertaining films in this entire genre of 1970s disaster movies, in my opinion. For me, I don't know if it's my absolute favorite film ever in this genre, but it comes very close to me. And I think it does so because, as I say, the disaster elements are layered on so wonderfully and so outrageously, such that you just have to go along for the ride. It might seem ludicrous, it might seem over the top, it might seem, yes, quite campy and quite delirious, but I think that's part of the charm. Indeed, that is a large part of the charm of this film. Another thing that makes this, I think, really great is the fact that the characters are really well presented. We really feel for those characters that I think we are designed to, or they are designed to have our sympathies. And when there are antagonist types of characters that might have a sense of not being very likable, they really are unlikable, and there is this way in which we as viewers can engage with the story. We can follow the characters that we want to follow, and when there's things that happen that are very frustrating and very unnerving and get on one's nerves, I think those character traits of particular character performances come out so sublimely and so effectively, thus creating, as I say, this sense of entertainment that we, the viewers, can go along with and have fun with and just be thrilled by and enthralled by and just be totally engaged with. And so it is just operating on every single level of entertainment factor, in my opinion. And as I say, I'm not sure if it's my absolute favorite film in the genre, but it's certainly up there, I think. It perhaps might be, I've never thought about it, but it is one of my favorite films in the Airport series, that's for sure. And I would dare say, too, that it has probably one of the most spectacular casts in any film that I have had the great fortune of being able to see. My goodness, if you're talking about a cast of characters that stars, among other people, James Stewart and Jack Lemmon, Christopher Lee and Lee Grant, Joseph Cotten and Olivia de Havilland, and George Kennedy. My goodness, this is an unbelievable cast. This is the reason why films like disaster films from the 1970s, this is why these films are so great. It's because there is this spectacle, this Hollywood charm, and the way that the cast and crew are really on board to give us a pure and unadulterated sense of cinematic entertainment in the grand sense of that term. This is really quite wonderful. Once again, it is so outrageous and it's so over the top in places that perhaps this film isn't for everyone. And in fact, I think that might be a grander statement in terms of the disaster film genre overall. The disaster film genre certainly isn't for everyone, and that's certainly a case for a film like Airport 77. However, if one goes along with this genre, and one is having fun with this genre, and one is entertained by the genre, and one is thrilled by the spectacle that examples from this genre can present, then I would dare say, too, that a film like Airport 77 is one of the great examples and one of the great representations of this disaster movie genre, especially as we get into the late 70s and how the genre developed. I should return to that point too. This film also shows us just how the kind of trajectory, shall we say, or an example of the type of trajectory that these films are following from the early successes of the early 1970s, starting from the first Airport film, leading on to great highlights like, say, The Poseidon Adventure or The Towering Inferno, and then, or Earthquake, and then we get into the mid-70s and then the late 70s, and we start to see various developments and various subcategories. Some might be more successful than others. Again, that's for you to decide as the viewer and overall consumer of the cinema product, of course. I think Airport 77 falls into that latter category quite nicely because, it, as I say, it is a wonderful, outrageously wonderful and so cinematically entertaining example of just how these substrands and subcategories and development upon development upon development, how they really tend to create even more outrageous situations and more possibilities for camp and humor and, yes, entertainment on a grand cinematic scale. And so with that, my friends, I am so entertained every single time I watch this, which is one of my favorites in this series. This is the film Airport 77. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. I will say it one more time. Please continue to be well and be happy. And I hope to see you again very soon. But in the meantime, my dear friends, cheers.